Hello, everyone. Just quickly, I know we've done that little bit of an introduction, but here's a re-introduction. We've just finished the episode with our guest, and we should mention it sounds like a house is being built. For the first 15 minutes of it, we're going to edit it as best we can, and it does get better. We promise it fixes itself. The bookshelf is built.
It's like a full-blown commercial construction site for 15 minutes.
I think we mentioned it's like he's on the block week 2.
It is ridiculously bangy.
And
early
usually,
on, and we didn't know this, and we just kept going with it. So please battle on. It's a great chat.
Yeah.
He's a legend.
We edited out the banging as much as possible, but it's also like an Australian TV hero. And usually I would say, hey, can you please stop that?
I was thinking,
Dylan
let's
was
stop
like
him.
elbowing me.
I'm
and I
like,
was
let's stop him, but you were fanboy too much. You didn't want to.
I'm like, not our next guest. So just remember, for the first 15 minutes, there is some banging. We've minimised it as much as possible, but it does get better at the end.
See, it's pretty hard to hear, so see if you notice it. Yeah.
I think we have spoken enough because I'm so excited to get this next guest on, and let's let him introduce himself.
Yeah. Hi, Dylan.
That's you.
Hi, my name is Tim Ferguson, but to pronounce it correctly, you call it Tim Ferguson. It's very different. I hate it when people get it wrong. It's great to be here talking about disability, which is one of the most exciting topics on earth because it is the next wave, and we know it's the next wave because nobody knows it's coming. The work is not finished in terms of equality and diversity. But now I think the world is starting to wake up to the simple fact that the next wave, the next human economic wave is going to be peopled by people with disability. And if you're thinking, oh my God, I've never heard that, it's because you're one of the ignorant people. But I know that Angus and Dylan are all over it.
What I will say is it's almost like you've done some broadcasting before, Tim. You're not bad at this.
Not a bad storyteller.
That's not a bad opening by you, mate.
Well, I figured you wanted me to introduce myself, so I figured I'd go galloping into a topic, even though it might be the wrong topic. You might have wanted to talk to me about hair care products and that sort of thing, and I can do that.
Well, I'd like to start, Tim, by saying thank you. I have a vivid memory, and it's a beautiful memory, of being at 220 Scott Street in Warwick-Nabil, which is a regional Victorian town. And I remember being with my family, including members who aren't with us anymore, my grandpa, and sitting on the couch and watching Don't Forget Your Toothbrush. And I worked in radio for 15 years, and, every so often in the cyclical cycle of, trying to be relevant, we would always go for some sort of nostalgic break, and we would mention Tarzos, and we would mention, Hey Arnold. And I would always use the reference, Don't Forget Your Toothbrush. It was a show that brought our family together on Channel 9. I can't remember what night it was, Tim.
Yeah, they put it on the biggest audience night of the week, which is Tuesday following the other biggest night, Monday, which is, if you want a lot of people to watch you, go early in the week because everybody's out on Friday. Everybody's out on Saturday. That's what people watching Hey Hey were doing. They were getting ready to go out and party.
But I went back for a nostalgic look while I was at the gym this morning on the bike, and I watched a full episode, 45 minutes of Don't Forget Your Toothbrush, and I had chills. It just took me back to that memory being with my family. And I said to Dylan, this show today still stacks up as genius. I like to consider myself like someone who's pretty on the precipice of creative ideas, and I couldn't see what was coming next. Stopping in the audience and just saying, "Excuse me, Jessica Marie," the shock of the audience member, "Do you own a pair of bunny slippers?" And then her face dropping and the realization, and then crossing to a live camera of a producer out at a Vinnie's bin and saying, "I'll give you $500 if you throw these out right now." And I was just, the live theatre of it, live TV, I was just enamored with this. I just thought this, and it just kept going. Someone had 15 seconds in a room to kill a fly. And I was going, this won't, this wouldn't work in 2022. But there you are, you bring out a little affidavit of the fly saying, "I give permission to be killed on this TV show." And it's just, I was watching it going, wow. I mean, it needs to be recreated, but it should never be recreated because it was just so good. So thank
Are
you.
you trying to angle as the new host?
No, mate, it was
Forget Your
just,
Toothbrush?
I wouldn't do it justice. Nobody could. You were so amazing in that role, so energized, so perfect. And mate, thank you so much for so many great hours spent with my family as a kid.
No worries, Angus. You know, the reason why we had the affidavit written by the Fly was because it was the second Fly on Don't Forget Your Toothbrush. The first one was Larry the Fly. And Larry the Fly, the idea was we'll give you whatever it was, $10,000. And I think we gave the woman a daffodil and we let the fly out in this giant Perspex box we're building here.
I was going to say, did you just kill a fly in the background?
Yeah, did he kill a fly?
That sounds
The
like you're
fly
killing flies at your house.
And the idea was you let the fly out and then she has to run around the 10 by 10 Perspex box and kill the thing. Of course, the fly had been in a jar all day, so it just jumped out, fell on the ground. She whacked it with the daffodil and she got the money. But people complained because it's television. There's always someone who's going to complain. And people complain, say, my God, you killed one of God's creatures in front of my children on the television. So the next week, we had Louis the Fly writing a little affidavit saying, I accept all responsibility for my actions. And the next week, no complaints. I mean,
Genius.
people are so easily assuaged.
A question. Sorry, you go.
You go, man.
A question for you then around that on the topic of Don't Forget Your Toothbrush. Do you think that, I mean, you were perfect for that role. Do you think that, because, you know, we'll get to your disability in a second, but you do live life in a wheelchair, you're a chair user. Do you think if you were in a chair back in that era, you would have had the role? Or because, I mean, there were so many stairs, it involved climbing up through the audience. Do you think you would have got a look in?
Well, I had MS at the time. I'd been diagnosed long before the show started. But because I had relapsing, remitting symptoms, in the sense that they come, they go, you know, that's what they call it. So a lot of people can have MS and never know it, even though one time they had a funny hand that went a bit numb. So I couldn't have hosted Don't Forget Your Toothbrush by running up and down the stairs, but I certainly had a disability. I just wasn't telling anybody about it. If you look at old tapes, you'll be able to see my eyes are quite clearly crossed, which made me look kind of like Barbara Streisand. It kind of made me look like, you know, an adorable look. But there was something wrong with my eyes, which was just like, that guy, he's just, I don't know, he's just so funny, and people didn't work it out.
Why didn't you tell anyone, Tim? Tell me why.
Well, a lot of people with invisible disabilities keep it to themselves because, you know, why freak everybody out? Because then everybody's, oh my God, what do we do? And when you say the answer to that is, well, you don't do anything. You just carry on as normal. There are some jobs like, you know, hosting a national television show where you can't rely on TV executives or producers to be cool, calm and relaxed about the fact that you've got a disability. So I kept it to myself. And, you know, I wouldn't tell people one way or another if they've got an invisible disability. It's up to them whether they want to put it on their T-shirt or just, you know, go about their lives. Eventually, when I had a walking stick, I just got people asking me all the time, what's the stick about? Why are you walking with a walking stick? Because you know how they say Australians, we're so upfront, we're so easygoing. We also pester people a lot. And we'll stop people in the street and ask them shit like, what's wrong with the stick, mate? What's with the stick? Australians are very blunt, which is not an attractive quality, but it does speed up their imprisonment. But so, yeah, there are a lot of people out there with disabilities who just don't tell anyone.
And you're right. It's up to them if they want to tell anybody, especially at work. Like if there is cultures that is inclusive within a workplace, you're more likely to tell people because you feel like you won't face unconscious bias, whatever it is. I imagine in the TV industry back when you were filming Don't Forget Your Toothbrush, disability was just nil, zero. So if you come out and say that, you would have faced that bias and might not have got the opportunities you wanted. However, do you think it's got better? Do you think now, if you were, say, hosting the project or whatever, and you could come out and say, do you think you would get discriminated against these days, or do you think there'd be more opportunity?
Well, I don't know. I don't think TV executives have changed. They're still the same short-sighted people in the wrong job. They're too terrified. What, are they going to take a risk on someone in a wheelchair? But what if his head falls off? But that could happen to anybody. Carl Stefanovic could walk in one morning and say, I've got the flu, I can't come in. And Carl's off for a week. You know, someone with disability is much the same. Sometimes your head falls off and you just say, oh, I won't be in this week. But they can't tell the difference because it's, you know, it's television and free-to-air television. This is the last few months of free-to-air television, so let's enjoy it.
Yeah. But, I mean, I'm lucky. The tide's changed for me, obviously, but I don't think we need more representation across industry, not just that one guy in the wheelchair, one Australian of the Year on TV, you know? And I think you're right, because that you really, really, really need to be good at tennis and have all these things to get one little opportunity when other people might get it more, and I fully appreciate that. Before we get deep into the MS, how did you go into work every day knowing that you might have a relapse mid-show? Like, that's got to be scary for you as well. Or did the producer, or did nobody on set knew?
No one on set knew. And I figured, if I have some sort of relapse, then it's just like anybody can fall over and break their leg. You know, life does stuff to you. And so, no, I really didn't give it any thought. And it was a high-pressure job. And, you know, nobody's supposed to have, you know, that kind of pressure. We had a crew of 70. We had our own Air Force with a helicopter. We had planes. We had limos. We had our own bikie gang on this TV show, all controlled live from a studio. And nobody even does news live anymore. But, you know, that kind of pressure. Well, when you're young and stupid, you figure, why not? You know, what'll go wrong? The worst thing that can go wrong is, well, nothing.
Yeah. Did you win a Logie for that?
Yeah.
Hands up. Hands up if you've got a Logie on this 3 chat. Hands up if you've got a Logie. Angus?
Yeah. Angus? What's going on?
Angus?
Just stuck around in audio mediums for most of my life there, Tim.
Oh, mate, there's bloody...
Radio awards, you know.
Dylan got a Logie just for turning up.
I did.
Seriously.
Oh, we'll check.
A lot of people said tokenistic. You say it. It makes more sense. Graham Kennedy would be turning in his grave if he knew.
I did one good interview with Prince Harry. I'm in. Look at that.
Jeez. Tim, you said that you had, you knew that you had your disability, or MS was on set as you were filming. Did you use the term attacks? Could you describe what those attacks sort of meant?
Oh, yeah, right. So, like, an MS attack is basically when your immune system starts acting like a pack of disappointed Broncos fans. They walk around and they will kick anything, whether it's a car, whether it's a person, whether it's a street light, and they'll just attack it. So your immune system starts eating the stuff called myelin, which is like the rubber tubing around the nerves in your central nervous system. And then the nerves start to fritz because they're not covered from each other. And so what will happen is that your myelin gets eaten, mostly because your immune system notices that you're tired or you're run down or you're stressed. It figures you must have a flu of some kind. But it's not a flu, and so it goes, oh, man, how about this myelin stuff? It looks alien, and so it eats that. So it's one of the dumbest conditions a human body can do to itself, apart from, try to put itself up for election. So what happens is your wires get crossed or they stop working, and the next thing you know, your brain's not talking to your foot, or it's getting the wrong messages. And so, it just stops working, or it starts hurting, or it starts kicking around like it's got, its own business to do.
When did you first go full public with your MS, and what was the response, especially from industry?
The industry switched off straight away. So just for fun, I went on Good News Week with Paul McDermott and we did a funny sketch, and I mentioned along the way, yes, this is what my walking stick's about. And there were, like, in industry terms, there was no backlash. Nobody called me up and said, it's over, don't call us again. It just meant that the next time we went in pitching, people were like, oh, yeah, and they just never called back. So, which is okay, because it's only television. Geez, there's plenty of other ways to make a living. But in terms of the public, people actually stopped asking, because if anybody did ask me, I would give them a 10-minute explanation of how MS worked. So just by walking down the street and going, hey, you're that guy, have you got the MS? They would then get a 10-minute lecture, which will stop them from ever asking anyone about anything medical ever again.
Yeah. How did you feel, brother, when the execs didn't say to your face, no chance, but you deep down knew? How did it genuinely make you feel?
Oh, I'd already moved on. I'd already made plans that I was going to do writing. 10 years before, I thought, if everything goes south, then I better learn how to write movies and write TV. And then I thought, hang on, you can actually teach people comedy, teach them how to write funny movies and funny TV, because there's almost no one apart from the wonderful Kath Dollar guy at RMIT University and Andrea Powell, who's also in Melbourne, a great comic, who teach people how to do this. But there's nobody in a little town called Sydney, which only has 4.5 million people and is the heart of the Australian film industry, with no comedy writing teaching. So I realized once I started looking at that, oh man, this is like having a monopoly. So I started doing that. And now, here we go. Here's one I prepared earlier. This artwork is on its way to New York City. I'm quite a hit. My art is a bit of a hit with the Americans. That's a
Cool.
picture of a horse. You can tell that it's...
By the nose, the nostrils?
Because I can't draw, I call that abstract.
Very good.
It's abstract, naive impressionism. But, I started putting together things that would keep paying the bills. And it's like painting. If you do something for, 20 or 30 years, people figure, well, it must be a thing. We better get some. Is
comedy different for you now that you are living in a chair? Has comedy changed? Do you see different humour? Has different perspectives?
Well, comedy, I've got to say, is easier. When you're in a wheelchair, as soon as you come on, the audience is a little bit more nervous than they would be if you were an able-bodied yahoo. I'm 25, my name's Craig, and I'm here to say the F-bomb a lot, and I might even drop the C-bomb a few times. Boom, boom, boom. As in most new comics, you go on in a wheelchair, the audience is already like, what's going to happen? Like, what's he going to do? Can he laugh at himself? Is there anything funny about being in a wheelchair? And Dylan, well, you're in one. There is a lot of funny shit that's in wheelchairs. And it's funny because it's full and scary and horrible and dangerous. And that's what comedy's all about, as opposed to, I'm going to drop the C-bomb. Well, whoop-de-la-de-do.
I think also giving the audience the permission to laugh along with you is something that they get nervous about. It's like watching a car. It's like watching a car crash. They're like, should we? And then you're like, oh, he's taking the piss out of himself. Not that they're going to make really, ableist jokes, but they're like, oh, that's actually funny. I'm allowed to laugh at that, which is good.
Yeah. I mean, laughter is a response to danger. I mean, that's if you look at most things that are funny, there's something dangerous. There's a chicken crossing a road. Nuns shouldn't behave that way. That guy who, slept with a goat one time, like there is risk to status, there's risk to relationships, there's risk to being part of a society, there's risk to money, there's physical risk, which is where slapstick comedy comes from. it's all about risk and danger. And so people want to be able to find a way to laugh at disability so it makes them more comfortable. No one's ever walked out of our shows, even the Doug Anthony All-Stars, who toured only a couple of years ago to the UK, and that went well, so we went back and did it again and again. We treat me terribly. Like, they call me the talking beanbag, but the audience laughs and they love it afterwards. It's like, oh my God, you're making it more real and accessible, as opposed to when people are in wheelchairs, the comedy in their lives has stopped. You lose your sense of humor when you have a disability. It's like, what? No, you're still human. Stuff is funny. And if it's, the personal, dark and scary stuff, well, then you just have new material.
Well, I mean, I use humour to normalise my disability, always have. It's been a good avenue for me to make friends and things like that, obviously. Using it as a career now in TV and radio and whatever. How do you negotiate, though, the fine line where you might be able to say something, but then somebody else says something that's pretty ableist and offensive? Are you okay with everything, or are there some things that when it comes back to you that you find off limits? Like I'm pretty good, but there'll be some things I read, I'm like, you're a dickhead, and I'm okay with just calling that person a dickhead and moving on. But for some people with disability, obviously it really affects them, their mental health, things like that. How do you negotiate that line?
Well, it's much easier when you've got it. If you're the person talking about a disability and you're having fun with it and you're pointing out, here's something very embarrassing that happened to me this morning because, my legs don't work. If someone wants to feel badly about that or feel that triggers them, they're not looking at it the right way, and they're not looking at what I'm trying to do the right way. So it's a very simple thing. And if ever they came and asked me, what were you doing there? What do you mean laughing the talking beanbag? It's like, well, what's another thing you could call me? I'm in the comedy industry. I'm here to make people see disability in a different light, to relax about it so they can start talking about it. But I don't think I've ever had anybody complain. The only one complaint I had was somebody wrote on the internet, well, he seems a bit too happy. He's too happy and positive about it. Doesn't he realize how difficult it is? It's like, well, yeah, but me not being positive and happy about it isn't going to help anybody. Oh my God, I've got MS and I just want people to stop laughing for a minute because I want to talk about it for a minute. Much better to be positive, and I'm happy to be condemned for being positive and happy. You can take me out and sue me.
Hey, I was watching a doco, I think it was, Tim, about the Doug Anthony All-Stars, about you travelling when you first went over to the UK and did the shows, right? And something that was eye-opening, not for me because I'm used to it, but would have been for the viewer, especially comedy, is the lack of accessibility in comedy cellars, stages, music industry.
Always either an attic or a basement.
Oh, always, right? Tell me, was it a bit gut-wrenching when you realised you were going to join the disability community, that you were now cooked as such out of a lot of gigs? How did you navigate that? And I guess what are you trying to do or can we do to help change that?
We were at a big theatre, a big national theatre that just happens to be very old. And someone realised only when we turned up, we have no ramp and we have no lift. So it was like, well, hang on, I'm kind of in a wheelchair. Someone should have mentioned this. So we got Matt, who was traveling with us, you could only describe him as perhaps the biggest unit you've ever seen in your life. And he carried me and the chair up 5 flights of stairs to get to the stage. But that was the thing that made the theatre so guilty. They now have a lift and they've got ramps. The Melbourne Comedy Festival had a comedy club, they called it. Oh, how hilarious. It was a comedy club, it was a club of comedians. And I was doing a show at the Melbourne Comedy Festival, gave them a bill and said, "Oh, actually, I should be doing the club." And they said, "Yeah, wow, yeah, you're so old, that'll really work." But it turns out they didn't have a lift and they didn't have a disability bathroom, and they just, So I kind of kicked up a rumpus, and now they've got a venue that has a lift and disability bathrooms. And I said, you need a disability bathroom for two reasons. One, so people with a disability can go in there, have more room, and sometimes you need two people in there to get all the valves and plugs moving. But the other reason is so that people can go and have sex there, have more room and some privacy.
Yeah.
Have you christened it? Have you
christened it?
Yeah, the disabled bathrooms.
Yes, in both senses.
Yeah,
because, that's why they've got the wheelchair on the door. Don't tell me they're not useful.
Do you think we're speaking about comedy and comedy clubs, and I'm sure there's a lot of young Australian comics that thank you for the access that you've given in that venue. Do you think, you talk about allowing your friends through the Doug Anthony All-Stars and having that comfortability with those people who know you best, and talking about disability as somebody with a disability on stage, there is sort of this idea I've heard like Bill Burr and Ricky Gervais speak about that nothing is really off limits for them. Do you think it's funny for people to make jokes if they're able-bodied about people with disability?
Oh, it depends on the joke. It depends on what they're trying to say with the joke. I mean, every joke can easily be pulled apart where you can find what the intent of the comedian is, like what's really being said. So it depends what you're trying to say. If someone's just trying to laugh at, someone with vision impairment, if that's where the joke starts and ends, it's not going to stay in their routine for long. It certainly won't, make them any friends.
What about terminology then? What about if somebody uses...
Language is important.
Language, yeah, exactly. So what if somebody uses an R word?
S word,
yeah,
M word.
Those kind of words that were the vernacular 10 years ago and people are trying to, relearn themselves not to use. Like I have in my friendship group, sometimes on WhatsApp, someone will say, "Oh, mate, this bloke's R word." And I'll be like, "Hey, watch that." And they're like, "Yeah, good pickup." But if someone's using, what if it's the best joke ever and the terminology's wrong? How do you feel?
I still feel fine. I think there are a lot of restrictions upon that people are placing upon themselves because they're not thinking about it right. Any word is usable so long as you use it in the right way. So long as you're making a point, maybe laughing at yourself or laughing at a certain mentality, any word is allowable. Once we start taking words, out of the dictionary, then out of common usage, then we are restricting free speech. So for me, anybody can use any word so long as the context is right and they're trying to make the right point.
It's interesting because a lot of people have different takes on that as well. You know what I mean?
And I love comedy as well and freedom of speech as well. I'm not sort of taking that away, but my point with using that R word then, let's use that as the case study, is by using that in comedy, allowing people in on the joke in the context that you're providing, is there some sort of idea that we're then allowing people to appropriate it into their language because they thought it was fine? Hang on, I heard the Doug Anthony All-Stars do it. Why are you being upset about it?
Giving them the authority to use it.
Yeah, if that makes sense. When they're able-bodied, don't have a right. If that makes sense. I'm just sort of playing devil's advocate.
Right. They would have to be a moron and a cold-hearted sociopath to say, "Oh, this gives me a license to use the word in any context I like." We know these are bad words, and so if you're going to use them, be sure you know why you're using them, what your point is. Only a moron would walk away and say, I'm going to start using the N-word because I've watched Dave Chappelle and I feel as a white man that I own that word too. It is in common usage, but you have to be a member of a certain club to be able to use it. So you'd only have to be a moron. We can't worry about the stupid blunt heads. We just can't.
Yeah, the problem is there are a lot of stupid morons out there who get around on social media and do it. I'll tell you a joke that I did, Tim, they got me into trouble. When the North Melbourne football team were having a bit of a tough time,
I remember this.
I said that I reckon I could get a kick for North Melbourne at the moment. And the three responses were this. One, if you got the ball on the field, how would you even kick it? That's the joke. Two, do you genuinely think you'd be able to get the ball because you can't run? That's also the joke. And the third part was, which is what we're talking about here. Well, if you can make a joke about you not being able to kick, I can call you an R word, S word idiot, because you now give me the authority. And I was like, I should have done that. I would never say that about an individual. It was probably a bit of a dick move for me saying it about a team that wasn't going well, and I'll own that. And I probably won't do that again. But the absolute. I'm telling us, Angus. I'm talking like
I went through and got like the worst tweets, and we did it on radio as like bad tweets.
You didn't get it. And you're like, I can't. The whole point is I can't kick it.
I'd say half the responses were people going, "Oh, cool, yeah, dude, you can't kick. You're spastic."
Yeah,
that's literally what he got.
And you're like,
that's the joke, and I'm allowed to make it. But people thought floodgates are open. Let's go.
Yeah, it's interesting. How do you, I think, and I was just like, whatever, because I can't control the way people write about us online. You're probably the same. You know what I mean? It was just an interesting thing. I was like, wow, people don't really get the joke, do they? You know?
Yeah, or then that's because they are stupid. There is a lot of stupid out there, and God bless them because they still buy our albums. But it's you just can't be responsible for how people hear something. Otherwise, you'd never say anything. I mean, everything is offensive. I remember going on TV and encouraging people to drink milk. Drink milk, it's good for you. We were doing a Drink It Freddy quick ad thing. And somebody wrote in saying, what about the lactose intolerant? Okay, that was really insensitive. It's like, of all the insensitive things I've said on television, drinking milk was right down the bottom. So the main thing is, which I tell the stand-ups that I teach, is so long as you know what you're saying. So if you get dragged up onto the ListenABLE podcast and Dylan and Angus say, hang on, what was that joke about? You can actually say, oh, duh, guys, my intent was to pick on this or to highlight that. You've got to have a point.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
I'd also like to add, obviously, Tim and I are both the same, but our word is gospel. You know what I mean? So, like, we have different opinions. I don't use the R word personally, but I'm sure other people with disability would have different opinions on this. And the best way to figure out, if you've got a friend with disability, what you can and can't do, ask them. Ask your friend. Ask that person that you work with, because that lived experience, they'll be able to tell you not everybody is the same. I think you'd agree with that, Tim.
A lot of the time when people say they are triggered, particularly if they have a disability, it's not so much they feel powerless or they feel injured. It just pisses them off. So they could hear a word or hear a joke and they go, well, that triggered me. But, it can be just that, well, that gives me the shits, as opposed to, oh my God, and now I can't move and I feel so pained. And a lot of people with disability are far more empowered when it comes to that sort of language, that sort of mentality, because a lot of people have dealt with it their entire lives through primary school. And so a couple of the people I know have been through that, and they just say, it just makes me grumpy. It doesn't make me feel powerless, because then I have to go at them and bite their heads off.
Tim, we're going to do our Bowl of Uncomfortable. This is where people send us questions about our guests, usually a question that they wouldn't feel comfortable asking you as a stranger, but maybe give us the responsibility, now that we've broken bread together, to ask you.
Mine's actually a personal reflection of when I saw you once, Tim, because you used to live in St Kilda, correct? St Kilda?
Yeah.
If you don't mind me saying that. You walked past a cafe called Itty Bitty. Remember where Itty Bitty is in St Kilda? And I was with my mate, I won't name him, and we were having a sandwich, and it was pre-wheelchair, still walking stick, but you were struggling, right? And my mate said, oh, that's so sad. What a fall from grace. That kind of vibe. And I was pissed, right? Rightfully so. But I wasn't full advocate Dylan guy. I was still young. I was like 21, 22. What's your response to when you hear something like that? Because obviously you're still doing stuff, but my response was to defend you and me. Like, just because he walks different doesn't mean anything. He might be stoked. He might be happy. He might be successful. When you hear that, how does it make you feel that someone thought that? But what's also the way that you respond to it?
Yeah, I get confused when I hear people, find that sad because they've let it bring them down. Maybe if I'd been a pole vaulter or, I don't know, an astronaut, then, getting MS might have been a problem that, snatches away the career. Fortunately, I'm in the comedy business, so it just took changing gears a bit. So there's maybe the best thing is not that, oh, gosh, that's sad. Maybe the best thing is to say, gosh, that's frustrating, because I've seen how bad that guy can dance, and it's hilarious when he tries. So, yeah, for people to be sad at someone's disability, unless it has left them completely without an ability in any way to at least reach for their goals and reach for some kind of dream and have relationships in the world, it's the same thing. You've got to be happy and positive, because being miserable and pessimistic doesn't get you anywhere.
Love it.
Tick. Well said.
What a great way to finish.
Tim Ferguson.
Well said.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
We'll be clipping that one
Very
up for the
poetic, mate.
socials.
We'll
You know what
clip
you're
that
doing.
one.
That's a ripper.
We'll have your links below for anyone who wants to get in contact with you and talk comedy in Sydney
Hang on,
or in
before you
Australia.
go,
I know
can
you
you
do a lot
write-
of Zoom stuff as well.
Can you write me in a script, Tim? Write me in, mate. I want to do some acting. I know we tried to do this years ago, and I stuffed it up basically. But I'm retired. I'm washed up. I need a career, mate.
That's right. Cool. I'll put you in the sketch. In fact, we're working on one where there's, in fact, it would work very well.
Don't say it on this podcast. Keep it for us so we can.
And, I also need representation as well. White, able-bodied guy.
No, you can get your own.
Yeah.
Right?